He walked into the conference room, thinking it would be a simple pre-deal briefing. But the moment he took his seat, the shift was immediate. A manager pulled the documents out of his reach. Another rolled their eyes, as if his presence was an inconvenience, and then almost too accidental to be accidental. A glass of red wine conveniently tipped over, spilling straight onto his lap. In a room preparing for an $800 million contract, they treated him like he didn't even deserve a chair, because they thought he was nobody. But the part they never saw coming was this: the deal they were celebrating. It existed because of him. So the real question is, what happens when the nobody turns out to own everything? Before that meeting, his life looked nothing like the world he was about to walk into. Marcus had built his career quietly, almost invisibly, at least to the people who only noticed titles, clothes, and skin color. Day after day, he arrived early, long before office lights flickered awake. While others fought to be seen, Marcus focused on results. He didn't chase recognition. He chased excellence. He worked behind the scenes, shaping strategies, saving sinking projects, and earning trust from people who valued outcomes over appearances. Outside of work, his life was simple morning runs, late-night reading, weekend calls to his mother who reminded him, gently, to keep going, even when the world pretends not to see you. Despite his success, Marcus had grown used to small dismissals, the way some executives avoided eye contact, the way interns were treated with more warmth than him, the way rooms sometimes fell silent when he entered. But he never let those moments slow him. He believed the work would speak loud enough one day. That day came sooner than he expected. The company was preparing for a record-breaking deal, one that would change its future. Marcus had spent months building the foundation quietly, anonymously, letting others take credit where it helped the company move forward. He wasn't worried about being the face of anything. He just wanted the deal to succeed. What he didn't anticipate was how quickly people would show their true colors when they assumed he held no power, and how a single meeting would rip the mask off everything he thought he understood about respect, race, and the cost of being underestimated. Marcus stepped fully into the boardroom, carrying only his laptop and the folders that contained months of strategy, projections, and research. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee, a scent that normally signaled focus and professionalism. Today, it felt like something else, an invisible weight pressing against his shoulders. He scanned the room, noticing the familiar faces of executives he had worked with for years. Their eyes flicked toward him, then away, the first sign that something was off. As the meeting began, Marcus tried to contribute quietly, offering insights and pointing out overlooked details. But each time he spoke, he was interrupted or dismissed with a polite nod that never reached the eyes of the listener. A document he had meticulously prepared slid from his hands, only to be shuffled aside by someone else with a slight smirk, as if to remind him where he belonged. The subtle humiliations escalated quickly. A glass of wine, red, heavy, expensive, was set in front of him, tilted just enough that it spilled across his lap when the meeting grew heated. Some laughed quietly. Others glanced away, pretending nothing had happened. The smell of alcohol and fabric clung to him as he tried to maintain composure. Yet the worst wasn't the wine. It was the way the room's energy shifted. He was ignored in decisions he had built the foundation for. Suggestions he had made months earlier were repeated aloud by others, celebrated as original ideas. Marcus felt the familiar sting of invisibility, but sharper, because the stakes were so high. This was no ordinary day. This was an $800 million deal, a milestone, and he was being treated as if he were invisible. And then the meeting took a more insidious turn. A senior executive leaned back, arms crossed, scanning him with a look that made Marcus's chest tighten, a mixture of amusement and contempt. The implication was clear. He didn't belong here, and everyone else knew it. A junior associate whispered, barely audible, who invited him anyway. The words pierced him, not because he doubted his worth, but because the room confirmed it. This wasn't about incompetence. This was about judgment, preconceptions, and assumptions rooted in something he could not change. Marcus gritted his teeth, refusing to be rattled. He focused on the deal, on the numbers, on the work that only he fully understood. But each slide, each decision, each ignored comment stacked tension in the room like a powder keg. His humiliation became almost performative, as if the meeting itself were a test of endurance. And somewhere deep down, he realized. The higher the stakes, the harsher the scrutiny. Then came the moment that froze him. An executive, joking with a laugh that didn't reach their eyes, suggested moving forward without distractions. All eyes subtly shifted away from Marcus, yet the words hung in the air like smoke. The message was clear. It was a problem in a room he had helped make successful, and just as the meeting seemed to reach its cruel peak, the subtle hints of what was to come began to surface, the unspoken truth that no one in that room could have predicted. Marcus was no ordinary participant in this deal. The very company they assumed had diminished his presence had been built by him. As the session drew toward its critical phase, every glance, every smirk, every pushed-aside paper became more unbearable, and Marcus knew, even before the revelation, that when the truth came out, it wouldn't just shock, the remit would shatter the assumptions that had allowed this humiliation to continue unchecked. The room had grown still. Every eye was on Marcus. Though many tried not to look directly, he felt the weight of their judgment, the sting of months, years of dismissal and condescension boiling in the air like static electricity. And then, finally, it happened. A document slid across the table, and with it, the subtle acknowledgement that the deal's success rested on work only he had done. The realization hit them first in disbelief. The whispers began, hesitant at first, then louder, sharper, unable to hide the shock. The man they had humiliated, mocked, and ignored owned the company. He wasn't just an employee. He wasn't a token assistant to be passed over. He was the architect, the decision-maker, the reason the contract they were celebrating existed. Eyes widened, hands froze. Laughter died midair. Every smirk, every subtle act of disrespect, suddenly felt grotesque in its audacity. They had poured wine on him. They had dismissed him. And now the truth loomed like a mirror. Their actions were not just cruel, they were absurd. Marcus sat there calm, almost serene, as the shock radiated outward. He didn't need to raise his voice. The silence said everything. The power shift was instantaneous, palpable, and humiliating for those who had underestimated him. Ilyan had Baik, not in triumph, but in quiet acknowledgement of a truth that had long been invisible to the world. Authority and respect were not given, they were recognized. A manager opened their mouth, then closed it again. Someone cleared their throat. Every attempt to speak felt hollow, empty against the weight of reality. Marcus had endured the worst of their bias, their assumptions, their racism, and now it stood revealed for all to see. For the first time in the room, the balance had shifted. The deal was no longer a symbol of corporate prestige. It was a stage exposing pride, prejudice, and the consequences of underestimating a man by the color of his skin. And as Marcus rose, straightening his jacket, a single thought hovered over the stunned executives. They had humiliated the wrong person. The question remained, unspoken but undeniable. Would they ever be able to look at him the same way again? Marcus left the boardroom that day carrying more than folders and contraxi, carried the weight of truth exposed, the humiliation he had endured, the dismissive glances, the accidental wine spill. They no longer defined him. In their faces, he saw disbelief, shame, and the sudden recognition that assumptions based on skin color could not stand when confronted with reality. For Marcus, it was a moment of quiet vindication, not revenge. He didn't need to punish them. The knowledge of his role, the undeniable proof of his worth, spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. What had been intended as a subtle reminder of his place became the very mirror reflecting the biases of those who had underestimated him. But the personal triumph was only part of the story. The incident exposed a deeper, uncomfortable truth. In workplaces across the world, people are judged not for their skills, dedication, or results, but for assumptions rooted in race. How often do brilliant minds go unnoticed? How often do contributions go invisible, simply because society refuses to see them? Marcus's experience was extreme, dramatic, but it was not unique. As he walked through the city streets later that evening, the hum of life around him, Marcus felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. One man had been humiliated by prejudice. One man had revealed it for all to see. But the system that allowed it, that was far bigger than any single boardroom. The question lingers long after the story ends. How many more Marcuses are sitting quietly, unseen, underestimated, and dismissed, waiting for a world willing to notice them. This is more than one story. It is a mirror. It is a challenge. It is a call to see, to acknowledge, and to act. Because until society stops defining worth by appearances, the same story will repeat again and again.